Have you ever had what I call a mental shutdown? And I'm not talking about a meltdown. I'm not talking about a breakdown. I mean just a shutdown where your mind just seems to stop functioning, period. Now, obviously, your brain is still working because, well, you would die if your brain wasn't working, but your mind, your cognitive capabilities, facilities just aren't there. Your frontal lobe, it's like it's not. Well, everything is almost like you're in a dream world. Now, I don't know if you've had that experience or not, but I've, particularly when I was younger, like in my teens or college years, I had plenty of those. And it's very frustrating. This is like an extreme fatigue. Well, what is an emotional fatigue? What is the fatigue that is faced by and experienced by people who have autism or Asperger syndrome? What is that all about? Well, what causes it, I guess I should say. One thing that causes it is abuse. Now, abuse is a broad spectrum. There could be physical abuse, there could be just flat out rejection. There could be ridicule, there could be belittling. I mean, there's so many different types of abuse. And if you have Asperger syndrome, if you're an Aspie, you understand this all too well because you've probably experienced it a lot when you were young, particularly in grade school, elementary school, junior high. Some people say the worst time of their life was high school. Me, I was kind of ignored in elementary, junior high school. High school, I think because I attended such a large high school that I was just kind of lost. Lost in the crowd. Sometimes the crowd could be so big that the social pressure is just not there. So I did okay in high school. But from my understanding, talking to people with Asperger syndrome, there is this abuse in their school where, peer pressure is everything. And because of that, you don't fit in to anything, let alone everything. And that rejection takes its toll on you, and it may manifest itself in burnout. You're just emotionally, you're just washed out. Sometimes I know some people come to a point literally of tears. Maybe they sink into some kind of depressive episode. But other times it goes beyond that, and your brain just doesn't, or your brain functions, but your mind just ceases to function. So abuse can cause that fatigue, can cause that burnout. Number two is invalidation causes fatigue. It causes burnout. Now, when we say invalidation, what we mean is you don't belong. You're just not a part of the group. And if you have Asperger syndrome, again, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It really doesn't matter what the group is. Somehow you just don't fit in. I mean, there could be a group of people having a conversation and you go into the room and you're all by yourself and you're wondering, how does this happen? I can recall when I was in, like first grade, second grade, we had our gym class. Most people call it recess, and the other kids would play together, talk together, and you had no idea what they were doing. Oh, well, you could see it. Obviously, they're getting along fine, but it didn't. How do they do that? Did I miss a class on how to get along with other kids? No, you have mind blindness. You just don't know how to do it naturally, but they do it naturally. It's kind of like a duck swims. They don't take swimming lessons. They just do it. It's part of their brain when they are conceived, when they hatch as a little duckling. They follow Mama Duck into the pond and they just swim. They just do it. Now imagine there is a duckling who can't swim. They're swim blind. And the duck gets in the water and maybe a little buoyant, so he kind of floats, but he doesn't know. Or if it's a girl duck, she doesn't know. You're supposed to paddle your feet. You're supposed to, sometimes you can duck down in the water, get something to eat, or whatever they do when they duck down in the water. The other ducklings know how to do that, but not you. You're just kind of floating around on the surface. I have no idea how everyone else is doing it, and they're all swimming off in a line, and you're left behind. That is sometimes literally what people with Asperger syndrome feel like, what they experience. I mean, they are literally left behind. The others go on their way, and you're over here all by yourself. That may not be the best illustration I could come up with, but, well, actually it was the best I could come up with on the spur of the moment, but you get what I'm talking about. We are invalidated. We're not part of the group. We By looking at it, you can't always tell. Some people can tell instantly, but looking at that duck, you say, "Yeah, it looks like a duck to me. Duck should know how to swim. What's wrong with that duck?" I know the duck's lazy. Maybe the duck just isn't motivated. Maybe the duck doesn't care. Maybe the duck is aloof. They come up with all these excuses why the duck isn't paddling his feet and swimming like the other ducklings. Maybe the duckling has mind blindness, just doesn't know how to do it. Nobody thinks of that. I don't know why, but we don't. We just don't. So that invalidation, being left out, being left behind, literally, that leads to fatigue. Number 3 is incomprehension. Causes burnout. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm fairly well acquainted with what we're going through here with autism and Asperger syndrome. I got a pretty good handle on it. But most of my life, I had no idea what autism really was. Asperger syndrome. I didn't even know that it was, let alone what it was. I was diagnosed at age 65. Well, long before that, I knew I had an issue, but, I finally got it diagnosed at age 65. But through much of my life, I had no idea why I couldn't swim. All the other ducks could. What's wrong with me? What is my deficit here? So I tried. I got in the water like the little duckling. Okay, now I'm an adult duckling, but I can get in the water and I just kind of float. I just never could get along with the other ducks. Then they take off and fly, and I couldn't do that either. You know what I'm talking about? Maybe I'm taking this analogy too far, but maybe not. But there comes a point in time where you just don't understand. What is it about me? There's something, but you don't understand what it is. And that lack of comprehension, that confusion can cause burnout. It can cause fatigue. I just don't get it. What's wrong with me? Number 4 is lack of modeling can cause burnout, can cause fatigue. Now, when we talk about modeling, what do we mean? Well, a lot of what we learn from observing others or experiencing others. Excellent example of this is speaking English. Where did I learn to speak English? I learned it from other people. Didn't teach myself, didn't invent the language, certainly. I just picked it up because I heard other people doing it, and that I could do. I didn't have a language blindness. And I remember a few years ago, I visited China for a couple weeks, 2.5 weeks, whatever, and when I was there, I noticed these tiny little kids, 3, 4, 5 years old, could speak Chinese. And I thought, man, these kids got to be really smart because they can speak Chinese. Well, I'm kind of joking, but they were modeling. They were reflecting what they heard other people do. Now, let's take that example and let's apply it. In life, particularly when we're young, we learn by observing others. One of the advantages of of having an older brother is I was able to watch my older brother sometimes do things right, sometimes do things wrong. I recall my brother had this classic old car, which at the time was not classic, it was just old. So he thought he would buy a newer car. And he did. And he was real proud of his newer car. But a few years later, he wished I should have kept that old Chevy because, well, now it truly would have been a classic, not just an old car. So I turned 16, I bought a 62 Chevy. And guess what? I didn't sell it. I kept it because I didn't want to make that same mistake. I was modeling. I would watch my older brother with his girlfriend. And he would do these weird things like hold the car door for her when she would get in. And I'd watch that. And when he would pick her up at her home, he would do this odd thing. He didn't honk the horn and wait for her to come out. He'd get out of his car, walk up to the door, knock on the door, and escort her to the car, And I learned from that. That's how you behave. Now, if it hadn't been for that experience of modeling what I saw someone else do, how would you know that? I mean, nobody sat me down and said, this is the things that you do here. I just learned from modeling. Now, the same thing applies to people with Asperger syndrome, that sometimes we are left out of the crowd. Okay, sometimes, almost all the time, we're left out of the crowd. we are not a part of it. We're not validated. So we don't always have access to modeling. So it's not just that we have this blind spot, mind blindness, where we don't understand how social interactions work, but a lot of times we're just not privy to it. We don't get to see it because we're outside the group. So these people are, it's not just natural, but they're teaching each other, by example, how to behave. Now, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, but you don't learn the bad or the good. You just learn nothing unless you have keen eyes and keen mind. You just miss it. So that leads to burnout. That leads to fatigue. Number 5 is masking. I think everybody understands what we mean by masking. And masking simply means you're faking it. You know, fake it till you make it, but the problem is you never make it. So we see, now that we're older, we see this acceptable behavior. And so we try to mimic it. We try to do the same thing that others are doing. But there's something weird about that. It's kind of like robotic, and others pick up on that. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it works for a while, but there's always somebody in a crowd who detects, nah, this is not a real person. This is a robot. This is a person with Asperger syndrome. They're not thinking these exact terms, but they say this person is faking it. And they make sure everybody else knows you're not real. You're fake. You're weird. You're out of the crowd. And so masking, I better hesitate when I say it never works, but I've never seen it work. With a person with Asperger syndrome, maybe it works for you. You know, maybe you're able to make your way through life masking, just totally faking it all the time, everywhere. I doubt it, but if you are, I'd kind of like to hear about it because, you're a unique person. So these are the things that cause us to have fatigue, that cause us to burn out. You see those 2 rectangles on the screen? If you want to keep talking, let's keep our conversation going. Totally up to you, but just click on one of those 2 rectangles and the conversation will continue. If not, well, thanks for stopping by, and we will see y'all next time.